coming up on today's show.
He had a 5-dimensional, like a 5D creature, like a friend. And I won't say the name of the entity because I'm almost worried it's like Beetlejuice. You like say it too many times.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, so and her and I weren't pulling them, so, like, I, like, shuffle and let the cards jump out, so and she like, when we were in New York together, I was trying to teach her that too, and that's hence kinda, like, why my cards got left with her, but so she was shuffling too, and the same ones were jumping out, so it's not like we were like, "Oh, here's the top card, here's the
Right.
second," so that was what, like, spooked us. We were both kinda like, "We gotta put these down."
Hi, friends. I wanted to record an intro to the Missy Hibbard interview. She is a friend of a friend that introduced me to her because Missy is the producer of her podcast. And I needed help with this podcast. I have been stalling. This has been in the works for maybe about 2 years. And I've honestly and truly haven't made these podcasts because I think it boils down to that I am worried about what other people think of me. Not coming out of the spiritual closet, so to speak. Like, I would love to talk about this stuff with anybody and anyone who will listen. My friends know that I will talk and go on and on and on until they're tired of talking about it, essentially. But that said, I just got really stuck with the technology piece of everything. I used to be super tech savvy and I did digital marketing for a living. I used to build websites. Once I had children, I even still did digital marketing, but it is crazy how things have changed in the last 5 years. So I'm unearthing myself. I am learning new things and I'm making myself do this and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. But Michelle from Beat Tan was kind enough to introduce me to Missy. And we even talk about this in the interview. So I wanted to give background on what the heck we're talking about. But Michelle owns Beat Tan, and it's a spray tan company that is way more than that. Michelle has built a brand about building up other women and empowering them and helping them start their own businesses. And she's just a wonderful person. And Missy was a great connection. And she's been so generous with her time and helping me get this off the ground. And she said, "Hey, why don't you just use me as one of your first interviews? And then we can go from there." And I was kind of like, okay, but what are we going to talk about in terms of spirituality? So, in the beginning of the interview, we talk about who she is and a little bit of her background. She has her own digital marketing agency, and we talk about a little bit on how spirituality and her instincts guide her as a business owner, which is super interesting. But then, if you just hang on, wait till you get to the end, where she starts to give stories about things that have blown her mind and some experiences that she's had. And this is what this is all about. I just love talking to people that you would otherwise not know has had some of these experiences. And that's the point of the girl next door part of the podcast. There are people in your life right next door, plain, ordinary, normal, quote unquote people that have had experiences and have aspects of their faith that you would never know about that are just super fun to talk about. And so that's what I want this to be about. Missy Hibbard and I would never have talked about her tarot cards matching her friends as they fly out of their hand via Zoom and on a normal, like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Oh, hey, I own a business doing this." So anyway, you get the picture. But I'd love for you to listen to the whole thing. Like, subscribe. This brings you joy. I hope you find this interview interesting, and stay tuned for many more. Thank you. Now on to the show. Okay. Well, thank you, Missy, for coming on That Spiritual Girl Next Door. I am Kelly Smith, for those that don't know, and Missy Hibbard is here to talk to us a little bit about spirituality and the internet. And I think that's going to be an interesting topic because we're going to delve into, is it valid? Is there validity to it? And how she uses it in her digital marketing company, spirituality, that is, and intuition. So take it away, Missy. Tell us about you and your background.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on your show. I'm honored to be a guest. And I think I'm excited to kind of dive into this topic because spirituality is such a like old school, traditional, not mindset, but way of life. And so it's been really interesting to over the past few years watch it make its way into the digital age. And I think there's a lot of people who are skeptical about the validity of it, but I've had some experiences where I'm starting to believe that it is, you know, maybe a new way to look at, the mystical or the modern mystical life.
Right.
So a little bit about me. I definitely am a independent spiritual person. I grew up in a organized religious background, but over the past couple of years of my own personal development and a very interesting spiritual awakening, I definitely have kind of found alignment with myself and really, really believe in like my intuition. And something you and I were talking about before we started recording is throughout this conversation, I want to be very clear that I am not a expert in the field, despite practicing my own channeling and spirituality,
Absolutely.
or what's
It's
special to me. Or it's like I'm not an expert in the field, and I am always advocating for anybody who is exploring spirituality to just always use your discernment, that your discernment and your intuition will never steer you wrong. And there are certain avenues of digital spirituality where there are scammers and people who are more vested in the quantity over quality.
mm-hmm.
That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
The
um,
scalability of the internet. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that there's a lot of um, gray area because spirituality, particularly what we're talking about, channeling and psychic abilities and astrology, there's a lot of room with the unknown. So I think that as a lot of readers say, take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely. I always talk about the spiritual buffet. If you don't like the green beans, leave them there.
yeah, and I think something that's interesting. So I really, really resonate with tarot. I learned over the past few years how to be kind of fluent in reading cards. And I was talking to one of my friends who's, you know, a male non believer the other day. And he was like, "You're going to read my tarot cards and you're going to tell my future." Or a lot
Uh,
of people are very reluctant and scared when it comes to tarot because they think that it's like a fortune telling
mm-hmm.
um, mode. But something that I try to explain to them is I kind of look at it more as like a free form of therapy because the cards mean something different to everybody else. But when certain cards come up and they represent like a theme, each suit kind of has a different meaning. Like it can be emotions, it can be creativity, it can be, burdens that you're carrying. So I think that it really just gives you a space to have almost like mental prompts. So if you're working through an issue or if you're at a point where there's like a fork in the road and your path can go either way, it just is like a tool that can help you process and figure out what the next move should be or what's right for you. I just think it's never going to be, people are worried that you're going to have a reading, it's going to pull out the death card, it's going to be like in
Right.
7 days you're done, but really I think it's just a tool for you to take a step outside of your current, like we all live in the modern world where things move so fast, our attention spans are so short. So it's really nice to just kind of have a outlet to take a step back and reflect and actually look at the bigger picture of how you want to spend your energy or your life or what you want to invest your time and energy in.
Absolutely. And I've had different decks that give you a perspective that you would never have considered on your own either. But that was almost felt like some sort of divine download that you would not have been able to make. You can't make that up. That sort of feeling of like, oh my God, you cannot make this up.
Yeah, and sometimes people need a spiritual epiphany to help them make a difficult decision or inspire them to do something completely out of the ordinary. And that's really what ignites true change. I think a lot of people feel very stuck in their situations. I've learned personally that psychologically, if you're time traveling, which means if you're spending too much time and energy dwelling on the
Mhm.
past or the present, so dwelling on things that have already happened to you or dwelling on things that haven't happened yet, it means that you're out of alignment and you need to, like, when you're truly aligned with yourself spiritually, mentally, physically, you can live in the present and find peace in the present. And that's how we all should be living. I think we're all, especially after COVID, just riddled with anxiety. Everybody's, it's like you're not regulating your nervous system. So we're all just like stressing about what hasn't happened yet, or we're stressing about, how unfortunate things were in the past. So,
Mm-hmm. It gives
um,
a grounding to be here now, is what you're saying.
definitely. And I think that there's a lot of value in finding that peace in the present, if you
Hmm.
will. I
What?
mean, don't get me wrong, I still have anxiety and
Right, right, right.
but
But it helps
um,
to turn that off a little bit. Well,
yeah,
so
and
you said you had a interesting spiritual awakening. You don't have to go into vast detail if you're not comfortable. Can you give me a little bit more about that?
yeah, I think that right now, I'm in my early 30s, and I'm sure like a lot of people, kind of had a rocky childhood and early 20s. And I actually hit a point. I'm currently, one of my clients in the business that I have is kind of shifting from faith to, or, being a faith based program to personal development.
Mhm.
And that's something that I really resonate with, because I think a lot of people go through hard times and they go through trauma. And unless you find your own way to process it, like, you can't push away things that have happened to you, or like pretend like something unfortunate didn't happen. And I went through, I was working a very like high level job. And basically, I felt like I was reaching the end of my 20s, and I had all my ducks in a row. Like, I thought I found the love of my life. I thought I had that like high ranking job, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was paying the bills, and it was,
Mhm.
impressive the validity was there. And then one day, like, the company just decided to turn over, and with no notice, I was just stripped of this really important high level job that, like, was not to say it was a part of my ego, but
Oh,
it
but
definitely, like,
you
suffered.
defined yourself by it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they would, I can't talk about it too much because of like contracts parting with them. But it wasn't like, we had this kumbaya at the end where they were like, "Thank you so much for your effort." They were just like, "You're done." So
Oh
no
no.
closure, no, like, actual reason for stopping that job. So that's even harder. If I had like messed up royally and gotten
Hmm.
fired, like, that's one thing. But to just kind of like be on the ride and suddenly you're off with no notice, that's super hard to process. And then I kind of had thought I found my life partner, and that I was like going to get married and do all the like white picket fence
Hmm.
things that we kind of expect to do in our late 20s. And then that one day just was gone too. So I
But all kind
really,
of around the same time. So it.
yes, no,
Okay.
it was like one after the other. And so it was so funny because I spent so much of my 20s trying to like build myself up to be what like I thought everybody else expected for me to be. And although it wasn't like I wasn't living out my true dreams and passions, it was like enough.
Right, right,
So
right.
once I was stripped of that, though, I felt like I hit a point where I felt like I found out that like rock bottom had a basement. And I think that, you know, but it's good. It's good. It's like, it's almost like suffering an ego death, because what I realize now, and what I hope that like anybody who's going through trauma or hard times, is that when the dust settles from something like that happening to you, where, because it's one thing if change is like at your own hand, and you can be like, well, I made a bad decision, that was a bad call, and you can live with that. Or like, I decided to break up with them,
Hmm.
you can live with that. But when things just happen to you, it's harder to like find that closure within yourself. So, not gonna lie, I was very depressed for, I
Hmm.
like didn't leave my house for like a month, because I just sat there being like, what am I gonna do now? Like, I put all my eggs in one basket, what am I gonna do? But I realized, after obviously some deep reflection and some healing, that despite being stripped of all the things that I felt, made me, that fed my ego, that built me up to like what I thought was expected of me, I realized that I was out of alignment, because I wasn't doing what was like true and right for me, or what I felt like I was destined to do. So I definitely had, a spiritual awakening where, despite feeling like robbed of opportunity, or like pushed off of the track that I was like very vested on being, it offered me this opportunity to like completely pivot and rebuild my life, and to rebuild a life that I didn't want to escape from.
Oh
So
yeah.
like, yeah, so I could tell that that was a theme and a big learning moment for me, just like in life and my own development, of just finding true alignment. because so like if I can offer any like spiritual wisdom, no matter what you believe in, is I think that you have to be very aware of like what is actually meant for you and what's right for you, and being true to yourself, because I think we make sacrifices all the time to please others or to, pay our bills. And so despite the journey that I went on, as like impressive and validating as it was, I wasn't in alignment. And I felt like anything that was like an easy task, or like, something that should in theory be super simple, just wasn't, and became really complicated. And I always felt like I was fighting against the
Mm,
current and the flow. And it's
mhm,
like, it shouldn't be this hard. And I didn't understand that for a long time, despite like it was great for my own development to overcome those things. And that felt great. But at the same time, once I really started listening to my intuition and finding my own alignment and really serving myself, I mean, serving others is important, but like at the end of the day, you do come first. So I feel like once I started serving myself and finding alignment and doing a job that didn't give me anxiety, and that I felt like, I worked in the film industry on TV shows and movies for a long time. And despite all my efforts and, you know, time professionally being put into entertaining people, now I was able to pivot and build a business where like I help local businesses with services that help others. So instead of just entertaining people, I'm actually putting my time and energy and skills and gifts into actually like helping others, which on one of my client shows that I manage, we call it like living a life of significance. And I
oh,
think that back in the day that would sound very like religious and faith-based, but I think that you have to, once you find true alignment, you go into like that flow state energetically, where things suddenly like doors will open, and things that are easy or sound easy actually are.
mhm.
So I think that everybody could, if you take a step back in your situations and you feel like, oh, life is so hard, or I'm going against the current, I think it's because you're not where you are meant to be, or you're not doing what you're meant to do. And your environment is going to reject you until you get on the right path.
What a beautiful setup, right? So sometimes it's easy to fall into that victim mode of all this is happening to me, and then realize, oh, wow, actually, the universe does have my back. It's
It
actually
does.
designed to put me in the right place at the right time. So I don't know if I've even told you this, but I went into Beat Tan, get a spray tan, and I was chatting with Michelle, and I was telling her about this podcast, and I said, I'm just stuck on a few things, any kind of advice you have. And then that's how she connected us, and it felt very in flow. And again, I'm sometimes like, how are you so generous with me? But it still just feels aligned and so super cool. So that's a good example of,
Yes. And I feel like we were meant to meet, and I feel very like honored to even just have the space to, discuss my journey and share my findings. And if I can take a second to like, I am beyond grateful to have Michelle in my life, and I hope we can have a cut down where she can hear this. But I knew her, so we'll go back to me being rock bottom in the
oh, yeah,
basement.
sure. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, not at all. I have always wanted to say this to her. It's funny that this isn't a podcast that she's not hosting. But so at the time, lost my job, lost my partnership, all of that. And I was applying and applying and applying for the same type of job that I had just had. And I think I got like 100 rejection emails.
Mhm.
And when you're feeling really low about yourself and you just keep getting emails, from Indeed or Job Recruiter or whatever, that are just like, nope, you didn't fit the bill. Nope, we passed on a more qualified person. And you're just like, why?
Right.
Um, anyway, but I had known Michelle 10 years ago, when I was just getting out of film school at SCAD, and she worked at Social Club. And I
Mm.
remember one time she was just like, Missy, you're so beautiful. Like, have you ever thought of modeling? And I was like, oh my gosh, like, no one's ever asked me to model. And she's like, well, you're just so pale. She's like, you should be a spray tan model for me. Uh, like,
That's excellent.
and they just took the wind out of my sails. But I ended up doing like photos for her back in the day. And so I had moved away and, kind of started my career. And
Ultimate before and after. Oh, that's so
no, her products though are amazing. I
they're
love them.
great.
I love them now. But anyway, so I was applying and applying and applying for these jobs, like so depressed, so not sure what I felt like I couldn't make a move until I figured out like my job situation. And so despite, applying 100 places and getting 100 rejections, one day I get a call from Michelle and she literally just says, I heard that you're back in Savannah. I was wondering if you want to come and work with me and help me make content for Beat Tan and help me, produce my podcast and all of that. So really, despite all of my efforts trying to apply and apply and apply, I realize now that all of those jobs I was applying for were not in alignment with what I was supposed to do. And I just got a call and got an offer for a job that I didn't apply for. And that just like kicked off the rest of my life. And I started working with her and I loved it. Or, she's such a fun brand
I
to
was
work
gonna
with.
say,
Her
she's going to be
product,
so much more fun than an Indeed
oh my gosh,
application.
her product is amazing. And she's also somebody where like I can bring a creative idea and she's like, let's do it.
Mhm.
So I really, despite being brought up in a very corporate environment, she really allowed me to like unleash my creativity, which I'm forever grateful for. And, obviously I love working with her, but it's funny how it's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole where you
Mhm.
just, sometimes you can try to apply as hard as you can, but sometimes you just get a call like you weren't expecting and you need to take those opportunities because, I could have worked corporate the rest of my life and been miserable and burnt out and, mistreated, but instead I got to, pivot and take an opportunity that completely like opened up my life and all of these amazing adventures and other things just kind of fell into place. And I think that that's also what alignment is. Like you shouldn't have to force your path. I mean, you need to be tactful and make good decisions, but you shouldn't have to like force yourself into a certain part. Like it should all
Absolutely.
kind of like, blossom in its own way.
Don't push the rock uphill. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
need for all that. Well,
And I
okay, tell me a little bit about how you use your discernment and intuition in your business.
So I think something that I've always been a very like empathic and intuitive person from a young age. And I think that maybe it was like a survival tactic in my early childhood life where I had to be able to kind of like read people in order to
Mhm.
survive. Or, I was never in like a life or death situation, but I definitely had some like problematic people in my younger years. And so I just always like, I don't want to say I'm never wrong about people, but I always have like a gut feeling. There's people where I'm like, I know that I need to keep them close and that they're like an asset to my life. And then there's other people where I'm just like, I can maybe have a short exchange with them and I know that that they can't be trusted, or there's just like some energetic pull that tells me to stay away from them. And it's wild how like I feel like I'm never wrong about people. And I even have friends who will be like, you need to give this person a chance. They're changed, they're different. And I'm just like, no, like I just know I can't. I'm very tactful about who I put my energy into, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. And especially working in the entertainment industry, there's a lot of shady people.
Mm.
So I think something I've always been kind of true to myself in a way where I trust my gut and I trust my intuition. And sometimes it makes you a little bit cutthroat to default to that. But at the same time, it's never steered me wrong. And I see people who are on their own paths who aren't as far along as me and they don't listen to them, to that gut feeling. They don't listen to their intuition. And then they wonder why they're in problematic situations. So, really, your intuition is a survival mechanism, but at the same time, it's up to you if you want to listen to it or not. But I've definitely felt a lot more grounded once I just allowed that. It's not like a third party in a way, but you know how you have like your primitive version of yourself and then like your more conscious version of
Oh,
yourself.
sure.
So
Yeah. More like your higher self. Yeah.
yeah, and then other people say too that your intuition is actually like your inner child calling out too, or it's just like the most like bare bones survival uh,
Mm.
or form of survival, I guess. But
One thing
um,
that's interesting to me, and I want to talk about this more here with other people too, and I feel like it'll be a theme, is the difference between like so many spiritual modalities will tell you fear is there to push past fear. If you have like an instinct or an intuition, fear will always come, and you should push past it, which I believe is true at times. But then having the discernment that all fear is not bad. So like to your point
Mhm.
about people, like maybe if you're like, that guy's giving me the feeling, like instead of saying, oh, well, just push past the fear, take the opportunity, like maybe that
Yeah.
actually instinct is. So that's the hard part to me about this whole scenario is the difference in the two. I don't know.
Well, there is a great example. I saw it on a TikTok. I wish I could remember the creator, but they explained how if humans are the only one, like if you were getting into an elevator and it opened and there was like a bear inside, a predator or bear or whatever, humans are the only animals that would default to being polite and go
Oh,
into the elevator to because they don't want to offend whoever's already in there or
that's a good
against
analogy. Yeah.
any other animal would have that survival instinct to turn over and run the other way. But for some reason, humans, even if you get that little inkling that you shouldn't do it, well, we still do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I also saw another TikTok. It's where I got a lot of my developmental influence.
Which is
Um,
great. Well, that's a good segue. So continue
right.
though.
But I saw another TikTok that talked about depression and feeling depressed and how depression, yes, it's a mental state, but it's not like a death sentence or something that you're stuck with your whole life. Depression is literally your body indicating to you that you're out of alignment and that whatever you're doing isn't serving you or it isn't meant for you. So if you like continue doing what you've been doing, your daily routine or whatever path you're on, if you continue down, you're just going to continue to feel that way. But it should really be igniting you to want to make major changes in your life so you get on track with what you're meant to be doing. So that kind of circles back to me with my analogy of being like rock bottom has a basement and feeling stuck. A huge theme Michelle and I also work on is how to help people get unstuck. And
Mm,
when you're that vulnerable, you're kind of afraid to make big changes, but that's really what's going to like pull you out of what we call the basement.
I like
So,
the basement. I call it the hole, but I like the basement better because there's a stairway.
oh
The
yeah,
hole.
I mean, you
Like
go in the hole and then you find out the hole has a basement.
yeah, but the basement should have maybe it's a walkout basement. Maybe there's some stairs. Like it's not like you said a
Yeah.
death.
I mean, you have to getting out isn't easy. You have to fight for it and you have to want it. But I think that resilience and, you know, evolving as a person despite feeling helpless or feeling like bad things have happened to you, you ultimately always have a choice and you have a choice to be better. You have a choice to change. Like when your whole life may feel chaotic and out of control, you do have control. You have the choice to be better or to do what's best for you.
Mhm.
So, anyway.
No, I love that. I love that. No, also, so we're talking about TikTok and getting spiritual advice from the internet.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
one thing that we wanted to talk about was the validity in that and how the internet and I was going to say post apocalyptic 2020 has exploded that.
Dystopian. We're
Yeah.
dystopian. Yeah. I agree. So coming back once again to being in the basement of depression. So at the time, I obviously was stripped of all the things that I felt maybe made me me. And what did I do with my time being depressed? I defaulted to TikTok,
Mm.
because it was a great outlet to escape. And I found that my TikTok algorithm at the time was being bombarded by tarot readers.
Oh.
So that's where I had a hard time discerning if all of those readings were meant for me or if my phone was just spying on me and taking keywords or like reading my messages of like maybe where I was at in my breakup and finding things that maybe were signifiers in videos that were applicable to my life. So that's kind of where our discussion about the validity of online mystics could
Mm.
really start. So I do know a lot of people who are interested in like tarot and astrology tend to be women. And I know that like when I was going through a stressful time, my algorithm picked up and was trying to like do videos about like self help and guidance. But I did hit a point, 2 points. I hit a point where I felt completely bombarded by the same message. And although there were great like mystical influencers, Like one I'll name is, I think her name's Ginger Mama, and she's kind of a like spicy tarot card reader where she'll kind of get down to the bare bones of like, this person wronged you, and like, they're a lot of the videos I were getting were, how does the other person feel about you? And once again, how could a TikTok video even know or channel that? How could the AI and the algorithm assign that? So it's very hard when you're vulnerable and sad to not take off in the delusion
Mm-hmm.
that that's actually how they feel. But at the same time, it offers a space for you to like properly reflect on how you feel about the situation, and how, if you're holding on to someone or something too tight, how to release and let go of that. And something I started to realize as I healed from like, my rock bottom experiences was that I hit a point where I realized in my algorithm, I was like, okay, I have to start like unliking these tarot readings, because that's like all I'm getting now. I'm not experiencing the rest of TikTok like I should be. So I think a lot of people can also relate to that, where the algorithm sees that you're watching full videos and then just keeps feeding you the same topic.
Well,
Um,
and then having the wherewithal to in the basement to say, "Oh, the universe or the source is sending me these on," versus the algorithm, and
yeah.
knowing this would not be so healthy anymore.
And so I think too, it definitely helped me. Like, I was always interested in learning about tarot. I picked it up a lot more during COVID. But I definitely became more fluent through watching other people in their readings, which was helpful. And I'll give a great analogy too, where the first time I ever got my tarot cards read, I was like in college. And I remember the Queen of Wands was one of the first cards that was drawn for me. And it always stuck out to me. And it was like representing like the peak of creativity. And she created her own kingdom despite everything being barren around her. She had like a black cat and sunflowers, these were all things that signified me and I really identified with. But where I'll define me having a spiritual awakening was like going through my sad experience, my rock bottom experience. I actually felt more evolved and drawn to the Empress.
Mm.
And I guess there's like an old lore story about the Queen of Wands. It's the only magic affiliated archaic card, arcana card. And so she actually, I guess, evolves into the Empress. But then that gave me a perspective where I was kind of like, man, I've been dating a bunch of pages and I always thought that I wanted a king, but like like being a queen's not enough for me. Like I am embodying an empress. And if I'm gonna ever find love again, it's gotta be an emperor. So like that all of a sudden like helped me, gave me so much clarity on relationships and how like you shouldn't seek them out. You gotta like work on building yourself up, and those, your match will come to you. But there's no point in trying to force a match if like you're not developmentally like where you're meant to be.
Right, because
So,
we end up with the page if you're just
yeah.
the lowly one as well. I don't know what the equivalent was again, but yeah.
Or you're settling or whatever. And I try to explain to my friends that settling like that, or being an empress and being with a page, it may be fun at first, but it's kind of like walking around with shoes that are too small for you. Like you can shove your foot in and you can make it work, and you can walk around. You could walk a mile, you could walk 5 miles in them, but at the end of the day, your feet are going to hurt like hell.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, because it's not a perfect fit for you. So you can jam your feet in to fit, but it's just not for you.
Oh, that's an excellent analogy. So
Yeah.
do you use your intuition to help decide who your clients might be or who you work with, or do you
Yeah,
let
definitely. Or I also feel like not that I can like predict the future or anything like that, but I definitely think that not to say there's a mystical element to me, but I can kind of foresee if something, or maybe it's my experience, but I can like foresee if something's going to work out or not, or if like somebody is trying to, when we're building a scope of work, if they're laying on too much and like undermining how much work goes into it. I feel like I kind of have an instinct that I'll stand behind and be like, you know what, we need to book this out an extra day, or your budget doesn't fit this. And I've been like told before, I had like a male client once, and he told me that I was cocky because I was telling him no. And I literally just was like, I don't think that I'm cocky. I think that you're just used to yes people who will say yes to you and then later charge you out the nose because what you're doing isn't feasible, but I'm not going to, falsely advertise that I'm not a miracle worker.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And then did it work out with that guy?
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I tried my best to appease to what he
Mm.
wanted, but at the end of the day, he was like, you're right. And the other hard thing is when you hit a point of evolving and being a true form of yourself, you can't say I told you so. Even though you really want to.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But I do think I have another tarot card story that I'll get into where like your intuition is never wrong. And I think that there are things in the universe, like energetic pulls, you should definitely listen to. So I'll just give a quick story about that. So I just moved from New York, like post COVID. I was still working that corporate job, but I just moved to Pooler, and I remember just having downtime, and I was like, really, I had left my tarot cards in New York. Like I had a specific deck that I got during COVID that like I learned through that deck.
Mhm.
But anyway, I had left it at a friend's house, and I was just kind of one day, um, just out of nowhere, I started like longing for those cards, and I was like, I really miss my tarot deck. It sucks that I can't go to New York. Maybe my friend can mail it back to me. But then I was at like a Goodwill because I had just moved into my apartment. I was shopping, and literally later that day, I came across a deck of tarot cards with a little rubber band around them at Goodwill, and it was the exact same suit, like the same design deck as my card in New York.
You
So, and
can't.
I was,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I was like, these are not my cards, but I was like, what are the odds that like I was longing for those, or I had some energetic pull to them, and then lo and behold, I go somewhere where
That's a cool story. Okay,
okay,
I have a lot of spiritual experiences at
well,
Goodwill. Believe it
I have one more part to that
Oh
story.
God, oh God, keep
So
going.
no, you're good. So I bought the cards. I think they were like $3, but I was like, you're normally supposed to be gifted tarot cards. You're not supposed to buy them, but I did, and I was like, at least they'll like energetically go to a good home. But anyway, so I had my friend up in New York who had my cards, and I was like, oh look, these are the exact same style, the same type. And so I had her like, I knocked on my new set of cards and was like, I'm taking over and I'm going to put my energy into these. You remind me of my old cards. And so then I had her knock on the cards, and then we started drawing cards, and we were drawing the same ones, which like I got really creeped out. And I have one more creepy story about those cards after, but I was just like, what are the odds? But it taught me, when you think that something is like lost or it's never going to return, you have to intentionally put your energy out there to like summon, like you can like
Mm.
summon it back in some way. Or if you lose something, if my friends lose something, I'll say, well, have you tried summoning it? And anyway, so that was something where I was kind of like, I think there is like a mystical tie for me in the tarot, at least. So okay, so I'll let you go, but that was so
No,
cool.
I think that I'm so glad you told me the second part, because the second part's almost, it like puts the bow on it. I mean, the fact that the same cards, and then you probably just kept going, and you're like, okay, maybe we should
Yeah,
stop.
no, we got spooked. We were like, we need to stop. We need to stop, because like we were like, literally like, what are the odds? I think it was like the Three of Cups, which is actually like a union card, and then I think it was like the Ten of Wands, and then we pulled like the Ace of Cups, or so. But all of them were kind of significant to like what was going on.
Oh, wow. Okay, so see, I don't know a ton about tarot, and I don't know what they all mean. So you're telling me the ones you pulled actually reflect what is happening.
Yeah, so and her and I weren't pulling them, so like I like shuffle and let the
Yeah.
cards jump out. So and she like when we were in New York together, I was trying to teach her that too. And that's hence kind of like why my cards got left with her. But so she was shuffling too, and the same ones were jumping out. So it's not like we were like, oh, here's the top card, here's the
Right.
second. So that was what like spooked us. We were both kind of like, we gotta put these down.
That
Like,
is so wild. No, no. And then again, sorry to interrupt about it, but my Goodwill thing was, I swear I've summoned things at Goodwill often. And so I want to say it out loud because maybe somebody else will try it and report back. But I'm like stressing about my daughter and how she's not getting her homework done, and how I'm having to be like the mean mom. And there's not like she's not intrinsically motivated to do it. I guess what kid is, but
Right.
this
I was
was
gonna say,
first
who's
grade.
homeschooling?
Yeah, I mean, it's first grade, and it's like she's never had homework before, but I just don't want it to be a fight. I want to spend time with you. Anyway, I just didn't know what to do, um, and specifically for her and her personality. But I went to Goodwill, and I'm like, literally, like this book jumped out of me from the shelf, and I think it like fell on the ground. I don't know. It was one of these weird, and it was like how to make your kid do homework. I mean, it was literally like that in the title. And then I opened it up, and the middle page had the exact paragraph of basically the answer for me was don't. And that's really, and when I read it, I was like, of course not. That's exactly Conley's personality. You set her up, and then you say, I'll be back in 15 minutes. I'm not going to help you, but you can do it. And that actually is the way. If I nag her, if I make her, if I sit there and try to do it with her and then correct her as she's wrong, like that's just not going to work. But anyway, it was the
Yeah.
answers were inside me. However, they were
Yeah.
also in the book.
And sometimes you need signs like that. Or,
Mhm.
sometimes we want what's best or we want a certain outcome. And I think a whole theme about spirituality is like you actually don't really have destiny and what's meant for you def come into play. You can still make choices to get there, but you can't force things to happen. And I actually think a lot of experiences that I've had is like when I don't have my mind fixated on an outcome, that's when the
Mhm.
outcome that I wanted actually happens. Or, I have a day where I go out and I don't like get glam to go out, but suddenly I'm like out in the most like glamorous places having the best adventures. And you're just, so it's kind of just, you can't have super stern expectations because you'll be disappointed.
I think once you drop those expectations, life gets so much more exciting
Yeah.
because then you get excited for what is in store because it's going to be better than you can ever imagine. And
Yeah.
once you start practicing that, it's like you could wake up and lead like quote on the outside the most unexciting life, but on the inside it's so much fun. And now a word from our sponsors. Okay, we're back. Thanks, Missy.
Yes. So I guess it's time to enough about me, my spiritual journey. I think it's time to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into, our thoughts about spirituality through social media and digital platforms.
Cool. Well, and
Yes.
you have a lot of good background that and again, you claim to not be an expert, which isn't your like day job, but you have so much good information that you pulled because I think the premise of what we're talking about is ultimately how real is spirituality on the internet? Is it, I mean, people are utilizing it more, but how do we know if we're just talking to a charlatan on the other side or if they really are in touch with their higher selves, I guess is the question.
Yeah. And I feel like a huge part about whether you're getting, astrology read or if you're getting tarot done or a psychic channel, a medium or a past life regression, all of those down to the bare bones are based on connection. So I think what we're really talking about is like, how could somebody, without being in person or without directly having a reading with you, like let's say the TikTok tarot card readings that are just kind of, every tarot reader is kind of like, the universe has and the algorithm have brought me to you and take what you like and leave what you don't. But it's just kind of how the internet and the digital age is still so new, or, we're only really 20 years into having the internet. So how can such a, old school method of I don't know, how can mystical practices become modern? And where's
Mm-hmm.
the validity in that? Now, granted, you and I, before we started recording, we're talking about how, phone psychics have been around since like the 80s. Like that has been a really popular thing. But how can one give guidance that's relevant to you or give a proper reading if you're not directly connected to them in some way? Granted, if you had like a one-on-one appointment with someone over Zoom, that might be a little bit more realistic or rational. But I think that just having an algorithm assign spiritual messages to you is a little bit dicey.
Right,
I don't know if
right.
you have an opinion about that.
No, I agree. And I've actually heard said like AI and the algorithm can be viewed as like it's an entity into itself. So if you want to believe in it, but there's still men behind the algorithm, right? That understand how to connect those dots and ultimately take your cash.
Definitely.
How to play into your weaknesses, so to speak. Or, it could also be if you have a healthy skepticism, but also feel called to something and using your own intuition and discernment, I think it could be completely valid and ways to discover people who have different opinions or different perspectives that you otherwise wouldn't have considered. That's
Definitely. Or, and I think that there's kind of a little ethical gray area when it comes to digital readings or just having an algorithm assign something to you, because I think there's a lot of ways anytime that we're looking for spiritual guidance, whether it's to, a reader directly or it's to the mystics of TikTok,
mm-hmm.
we're exercising vulnerability and we're looking for guidance in some way. So some people default to, you know, like me, the tarot readings on TikTok because I think they are just looking for a sign. But once again, discernment is really important. And I think it's easy to be steered wrong if you're feeling very vulnerable. So,
And I love, first of all, I'm going to look up Ginger Mama because I feel like shout outs to the accounts we know are legit or resonate with us. I mean, again, what's legit, what feels right inside. So this guy is not like, he's like, it's interesting. It's called Healing from Healing. And
mhm.
he likes to share other accounts that may resonate with you and may be something interesting, or he provides the contrarian view that there's a lot of ego in spirituality. There's a lot of um, self-serviment that people get sort of stuck in. Maybe what spirituality can become negative and can become toxic, and he sort of demonstrates that, but on the other hand says, there's some validity to some of this stuff, and sort of puts it out there, and it's interesting the way he does it. So Healing from Healing is an interesting read.
Yeah, I totally agree. Or, not to say I can write like a book on self-help or, I'm not like a shining example of, healedness, but I think just looking into getting spiritual guidance in whatever form serves you. And then TikTok also had a lot of good like therapy or like psychology videos that
Mm-hmm.
also really help too. There's a lot of people who like do deep dives on like how to process a breakup or like your
Mm,
withdrawal from people hits the same part of your brain as addiction. And that's why people become stalkers. That's why they get aggressive. That's why, so it's like very interesting to kind of have the space to look into the nitty gritty of these topics. So once again, I think that having a direct reading with a person, a channeler like over the phone or over Zoom, they can at least kind of feed off of your energy and your answers versus just getting like a video on TikTok. But once again, use your discernment. Everybody's experience is different.
right.
But so going into some of like the research and the facts for this discussion, there was a report in 2019 that estimated the mystical service market in the US alone was worth over $2 billion. So I think a lot of that was fueled by the pandemic, but also platforms like Instagram and TikTok kind of gave opportunities to create community, and maybe a video would hit a user on TikTok, but then they would have like the TikTok shop or they'd have like Etsy where you could book private readings. So there
Mhm.
was like true marketing for small mystical businesses that wasn't there before. I feel like you used to have like a brick and mortar, shop where you could like do cards and like read people's palms and stuff. And now there's a space to kind of have like a digital shop, which, makes sense because spirituality isn't necessarily tangible. You
Mhm.
don't have to have a shop in order to do that. So another interesting fact that I found was that there's an increased acceptance amongst younger generations. So younger individuals in the millennial and Gen Z age groups are actually more likely to engage with spirituality through digital platforms rather than attending organized religions. Or
Mhm.
like going to church every Sunday, which I thought was interesting. So we're kind of entering an age where spirituality and faith and religion are becoming much more individualized rather than community based like they have been for the past like hundreds and hundreds of years. What they say, eons.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I feel like there's part of us, and none of this is negative per se. We're not saying any spirituality on the internet is bad or good. I think that for me, I find it fascinating because I'm a little, nobody's above the TikTok generation. It's just not something that I've ever like spent a whole lot of time on TikTok.
Yeah.
Like I just feel like, oh God, I'm a grandma, but that's not necessarily true. It's just not a place that I've searched to see how the algorithm will serve up to me. But podcasts have been my like buffet for spirituality. And then, one person will pop on somebody else's podcast and it just becomes a network of, oh, why did this person keep coming up in my consciousness? And then I go down their YouTube rabbit hole. And so it's an off brand of the same AI algorithm situation that you're like, wait, and then once they continue to pop into my consciousness, it's like, maybe I want to hear what they have to say and what their perspective. And
Yeah. And
but
a great example, someone who comes to mind is Gabrielle Bernstein. I think that like she operates on such a high vibe. Like she is such an impressive and great story, but she's one of the few podcast hosts, authors. Like she's building a whole brand around her practices, but she really tries to teach people about like manifestation, or, the power of manifesting and like being mindful about like what you actually want. And I think there were not a lot of people like her before. And she's not very like, I think the way that I've been talking about mystical spirituality and all of that has been a little bit not woo woo. I know on this show we like woo woo. But I feel like Gabrielle Bernstein's a great example of how to kind of weigh in manifestation and, self-help in a constructive way and like bringing in psychology and all of that. And she's got like such a fabulous following, and she doesn't have tarot cards, but she has like intention cards, which I think are cool. So she has an influence, but I like how she has her own spin on things, and it really does help people and inspire people.
Because religion has a bad rap for some people in their past, and they feel like maybe they've been abandoned by religion. And I'm just speaking for so many stories that I've heard, and so but then they don't need to abandon all the ways of connecting from within and to like where she offers that spirituality doesn't have to look a certain way.
And oh, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. No, go for it.
I think what it comes down to, like, no matter what you believe in, it's about having faith. And, organized religion really served us over the past 100 years, where like we didn't have the means to our own information. People weren't educated, and it offered a way to kind of give everybody an opportunity to have like the universal moral compass and to be a good person and to mean well and to serve others. And so like, I think we've really lost sight of that fact. And, it shouldn't be something that divides us. It should just be the fact that like we all universally believe in something. And having that faith, I think, fuels resilience no matter what you believe in.
And the community aspect of religion. And so many people do feel isolated and maybe are stuck on the internet looking for community, but the internet can offer community. There are virtual ways to connect amongst our beliefs as well. So it's not all. We're not saying that don't get your spirituality from the internet. It's just be discerning and really think about where it's coming from and maybe what their intentions might be, whoever's serving up the content.
Definitely. Or I just think that I love the way that you're promoting spirituality and, belief systems on this podcast, because it's not, disregarding somebody's, faith system. I think it's just kind of taking a deep dive in all the different forms, because, everybody's different and everybody has different experiences. So I love being able to kind of have a open space to speak freely and to not offend people. Use your discernment.
Right. No. And so in my improv classes, we've been talking about, I'm going to mess it up. It's intent versus impact. And knowing that as we're speaking, on this podcast, we both have really great intent with whatever we're saying. And we're hopefully the impact lands where no one is offended, right? Like there's no intention to say anything that again, it's a buffet. If we're not saying something that resonates, it's all right.
Yeah.
You can take it
I,
or leave it.
I think we're just here to inspire and empower and like spread positivity and love. And, that's also what I love about not organized religion is that it's kind of just an open book for whatever works for you, and helps you get on track. And so kind of coming back to the effectiveness and satisfaction of mystical practices over the internet. Uh, Basically, there's reports that within physical services of the industry, there's like a higher customer satisfaction with online readings because people are able to actually see or like interact with their whoever their spiritual advisor is more often. Where like
Mm.
back in the day, it was like hard to go like in person. Same thing with like going to a church service on Sundays. People live busy lives and can't always make it. So like having that digital option, people are actually going to it more.
Even if it's therapy. I mean, the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that therapy took so long, really, to be on the internet is kind of mind blowing. It took 2020 for people to be able to get talk to a therapist online, you know?
Oh, and there are benefits too. Like if you have an online session, whether with a therapist, a spiritual advisor, even your religious, your pastor, whatever,
Mhm.
you're able to have the opportunity to actually record your sessions, so you can look back and
Mm.
refer back to it. And before, if you just went in person, you kind of just had to retain whatever you could, and not
That's a
fully
good point.
take
Yeah.
everything with you.
Oh, I like that. Well, okay, so I've heard this story slightly before, but talking about the validity of these readings on the internet, has anything happened to you where it's sort of helped seal the deal that some of this psychic stuff from afar can be real?
Yes, I do have one story. This actually took place a couple of weeks ago because ever since you and I kind of talked about this topic, definitely was kind of leaning over more on being like skeptical about it because I know, like, for my own, anytime like I do a tarot card reading, I don't charge money for it. I just do it for friends. It's more of a party trick. But I definitely personally channel and read energy better in person. I'm an in-person experience.
Mhm.
But an example where I'm kind of leaning to the other way now is that I was at a friend's house a couple weeks ago, and she meets with her own. She has like a card reader, or a psychic who kind of gives her like a monthly reading. So I just so happened to be at the house at the same time she had her appointment. She told me, she's like, I'm going to be on the phone for like 30 minutes, but you're welcome to stay and hang out. So I did. And as my friend was getting her reading done, all of these details that were actually very, very like prominent to me in my experience, like I was going through a move, I had I needed a little bit of guidance with a certain client. And so she actually ended up getting off of the phone early. Well, what happened was I was just sitting there quietly on my computer. She was getting her reading, and then all of a sudden she started stopping and looking at me and saying, "Hey, my psychic wants to know like when your birthday is. My psychic wants to know like what your sign is. Are you like a spiritual person?" Or like she knew that I obviously was a little mystical, but anyway, at the end of it, she immediately had to get off the phone because she was like, "Your energy is seeping into my reading," and she's just drawing cards that are like, or she's like, I heard she started talking about a move and stuff at work.
Yeah.
Those are things that I know are you, and not, I'm not dealing with that. So anyway, they had to like reschedule their whole session for like when my energy wasn't around, and I didn't think I was like a domineering entity, but this lady located states away from where we are in Georgia. So that definitely kind of like swayed me because I was always skeptical about what's her name, Miss Cleo.
Yeah, right? That's what I was gonna say when you're talking about phone psychics. I just have them. We all have the childhood memory on the commercial, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I always thought Miss Cleo was a little bit of a sham. But after that experience, I maybe if I had my own relationship with a phone psychic, I'd feel different. But I was not a believer, and then that happened. I was like, you can't make that up.
You can't make it up.
Can't
Oh my
make it
gosh,
up.
that is a cool story.
Yes,
And the fact
definitely.
that she has a regular psychic she checks in with is pretty neat too.
Yeah, and I can tell you one more like creepy, okay, not creepy story, but you know how we live in Savannah and
Yeah.
there's definitely like spooky things that happen up in here.
Mhm.
So I didn't I never grew up like I always felt like I had a different, like a higher vibe and a different energy, but I never thought that like ghosts and like what do they say? Like we live in the 3D and there's like the 5D, like five dimensional creatures.
Mhm.
But I went with one of my friends to, on New Year's Eve, we went to like a psychic reading, one of the mediums on Broughton Street. Or basically, she called me and she's like, I want to get like a reading done. Will you come with me?
Oh,
And
okay.
I was like, okay. Or, like I don't, my own values and beliefs are, I don't believe in like capitalizing or like paying for spiritual guidance. And that's just me. Like if you make a living doing it, awesome. But like personally, like I don't charge money, or, I
Mhm.
do it kind of out of love and free guidance. Also, I don't want to have like the liability if it goes terribly wrong.
Right, right, right. I think that's
Um,
fair.
so anyway, we went to that new psychic on Broughton Street, and so we go up, like the whole shop is beautifully decorated, beautifully designed. And she was kind of just going through like a riff in her life and needed guidance. It was about to be the new year, so I could see why she wanted to do this. So anyway, I'm sitting in the room with them, and it reminded me of like, you ever seen the movies with like the Warrens, like this how she's like a psychic and they do like a seance? It
I haven't
definitely
seen that.
uh,
Okay.
like not The Exorcist, but like Amityville Horror. Like the Warrens show up and like things get weird.
Okay.
So anyway, it was like kind of giving me that vibe. But I was sitting on a couch and she was sitting with the reader at a table, and I kind of told her, I was like, "Yo, I don't think you should get your cards read. If I'm in the room, I'm gonna like feel otherwise. I'm gonna just like have my own opinions about what he draws for you. So I was like, you should just like get down to him, like channeling your stuff." And anyway, so he was very cool, very talented, but he told us that he had a 5-dimensional, like a 5D creature, like a friend. And I won't say the name of the entity because I'm
Uh,
almost worried it's like Beetlejuice. You like say it too many times.
oh my gosh. Okay.
So anyway, but he basically was like, you don't have to be scared, but I have like a 5D entity that I channel my readings through.
Oh,
And
okay.
he's like in the room with us now. But he's going to help me like figure out, do the reading. So anyway, I'm just like sitting there quietly, but like I kind of came to realize that like I am kind of an energetically sensitive person and like my intuition and all of that. But I started just getting a weird sense like as he started doing the reading, and I could sense this like energy. So I'm sitting on a couch, they're at a table in the center of the room, and there's all of these empty chairs. So I'm quietly sitting there and I'm just sensing this like restless energy that's just kind of like bouncing from chair to chair and bouncing around me. And I'm like, I can't see it, but I'm just following this feeling. And that's just like never really like it's only happened to me once before in Savannah, but I like faced a ghost. I know I'm starting to sound like crazy.
No,
Um,
this is the stuff. I'm like
I
so excited we're talking about this.
So anyway, but it was just like I could tell that it was like restless because it was literally just almost like a ball, just like bouncing from chair to chair to chair, but it wasn't getting like close to me. Like I was on a pretty like I was sitting on a couch, so it wasn't like close, but it was definitely just like vibing around. And then all of a sudden I sensed it stop, and then it just went up into the left corner of the room and was just like
Per
like chilling up in the corner. I can't see this thing, but I can just like sense where like it was just like
Wow.
it was such a weird thing because like I'm so grounded in reality and I love like, you know, magical mystical stuff, but I didn't think I was like, that energetically um developed, if you will. But
Okay.
anyway, so I could see it like hanging out in the left corner and it was just chilling up there. And then I just got this like sense where I was like, I was like, I think that I'm like setting this thing off. Or I feel like I'm like I'm worried now that I'm like affecting the reading. And
Mhm.
this was before that phone psychic too. So that kind of reinforced like where I'm at figuring out like my level of energy. But I ended up like, I was like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. And I like walked out of the room. And he also had two cats, like twin cats that like
Oh.
hung out in the shop. And they were right outside the door. And I literally like leave the room and they're there. And I'm like, can you show me where the bathroom is? And they led me like down the hallway. And one tried to like lead me into a room and jumped on a table where there were tarot cards and it like spilled them all out. And I was like, oh my God. Like, okay. So I like kind of hung out in the hallway for a while. And then when I came back in, their reading was like kind of coming to a close. And but that entity or like that feeling was like still like up in the corner. And anyway, so like they finally come to a close with their stuff. We're finishing up. And I asked the guy, I was like, hey, so like I have a few questions about like your friend. Like, do you mind if I like ask you a few things? And so I was like, when you do these readings, like where is he normally? Or does he like stay in one place? Is he like present? Like what's the deal with that?
Like, yeah, yeah.
And so he told me, he was like, well, he's always up, like he's always to my left. He's always to my left. And he was like, I could tell something was up though, because he was like circling around the room. And I was like, was he by any chance like up in the corner? And he was like, yeah. Like sometimes, like if something's up, he'll like go up to the left corner of the room. And I literally was like, I need to get out of this place.
So
I need to get out
it
of this place.
was maybe weary of you in a way, like it was excited and
Yeah, or I think it just, like, didn't know what
then
to do with
yeah.
me, and, like, I do come from like, I grew up in Massachusetts, like, next to Plymouth Rock, like, old school or, I lived in a haunted house when I was little. Not to say I'm, like, a spooky, ghosty person, but, like, I definitely have learned,
There's
like in Harry Potter, like Dementors and
uh-huh.
how like if you're scared, they'll like get stronger and feed off your energy. And it's the same thing with if you get like sleep paralysis. They say that there's kind of like a tall man who comes and like the more scared you are, like the closer he gets to you. So I just kind of learned from a young age, like it's kind of like seeing a bear. Like if it's black, fight back. If it's brown, lie down. But so you kind of just have to be like, like I acknowledge that you're here, and like, I'm like a light, light being, light creature, positivity. Not to say I'm like protected, but I'm just kind of like I acknowledge you and I see you, and I'm not scared. And if you want to stay here, you gotta pay rent. You
Right.
got
I think
like
that, I mean,
whatever.
that's how I feel protected. And I just think that we acknowledge that we're sovereign beings and what our intentions are here with, I know love and light is such a cliche, but truly these things that like you don't belong here and you go take your business elsewhere if it's
Yeah.
nefarious.
Yeah, but yes, especially if it's nefarious. But I think that like if we always kind of like fear overcomes us when we like don't know what's going on and if we can't rationalize the situation. But I think that like the more scared that you are and the more power you're giving these entities, the more they will mess with you. And
Okay.
like
I agree.
Savannah definitely has like weird energy entities around, but I think they're mostly like children from the yellow fever. And I think they're more like tricksters and jokers rather than like an entity that's going to, take you over and
Hmm.
you need an exorcism and all of that. So like I had never been in a situation with like a 5D entity before, but at the same time I think like having respect for those and where I was like I feel like I'm being disruptive, so I'm going to step out rather than like fueling
Or
the
if you're
entities
sitting
from
there extra nervous too and having fear of your own, it could fuel it versus sort of accepting, not being so afraid, knowing that you're safe, and then taking a step out.
Yeah, and,
And
like,
don't fire.
feeling empowered and in your element. So, I
Uh,
know I'm sure, like, anybody who listens to this is gonna be like, "Wow, she is good crazy."
not at
But
all.
I think that, like, you have to kinda have, like, an openness, and you have to have an intuition, and, like, energies are always going to be there. There's energies in people, there's energies in places, and, like, listening and like using your discernment, I think, are the best ways to navigate through those situations. I think when you're vulnerable and when you're scared,
Right.
that's when things happen to you. People happen to you, places happen to you, the unexplainable can happen to you.
Oh, I love that. And I feel like that is the perfect ending slash segue because I would love to have you back sometime. Well, I say have you back, but maybe we get some recording equipment and you and I are going to do a downtown Savannah
We
experience.
should. I would love to interview like the tour guides, or like especially maybe like we could do a Halloween special or something. But I think there's a lot of spooky stories in Savannah. Like I def have another ghost story I'll tell you offline, but I think there's a lot of like the paranormal, I think ties in with spirituality more than we understand. And like we all are, living in different dimensions, and our energy means something. And I think that's what the soul is as well. what
Oh,
makes you
what
you.
a fabulous teaser for the next time because I want to explore that big time. I love
Yeah,
it. I love it.
exactly. Well, thank you for
Thank
having me
you
on,
so
Kelly.
much for
Sorry
coming.
for being a little woo-woo, but I hope it helps and inspires anyone who feels stuck or,
It does.
hasn't
The
awoken,
woo, the
if that
better.
makes
The woo, the better.
Yeah, woo-woo girl.
I love it.
Awesome. Well,
All right.
until
Well,
next time, my friend.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to That Spiritual Girl Next Door. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found some valuable insights. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with some friends. But please email me if you have any ideas for future episodes or if you want to chat. You can email me at thatspiritualgirlnextdoor@gmail.com. It's a mouthful, but it'll work. And please stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, and we will be back with another topic. Until then, in the spirit of me hitting publish on my first episode, do something that scares you today.